First, to the United States, Bernie Sanders has suspended his presidential campaign. This clears the path for Joe Biden to take on Donald Trump. This has brought an end to the contest within the Democratic Party, even as several primaries have been postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Sanders made that announcement in a call with all his campaign staff. He addressed his supporters and also explained to them how this was a very difficult decision to quit the race.
Please know that I do not make this decision lightly. In fact, it has been a very difficult and painful decision. Over the past few weeks, Jane and I, in consultation with top staff and many of our prominent supporters, have made an honest assessment of the prospects for victory. If I believed we had a feasible path to the nomination, I would certainly continue the campaign. But it's just not there.
Most of the Democratic primaries had been suspended since the 17th of March after the number of coronavirus cases in the U.S. rose exponentially. And as a result, the Democratic National Convention that would have decided the party's presidential nominee has also been pushed back by a month to August. U.S. President Donald Trump, meanwhile, has reacted to Sanders dropping out of the race. On your screens is the tweet that he put out just a short while back. He places the blame of that decision directly on the senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren. Bernie Sanders, who is an independent senator from Vermont, faced a very different and a difficult campaign this time. His progressive push was a lot more stronger when he ran against Hillary Clinton in 2016. But this time, several candidates within the party had ideas similar to his own. Elizabeth Warren was among them. Elizabeth Warren became his nemesis during this campaign, pushing for policies to reduce student burden and taxing the rich. Warren had even expressed support to Sanders' brainchild, Medicare for All. Sanders, a self-proclaimed socialist, still managed to remain in the race until the final round, despite losing many of his progressive supporters to Warren and Biden. Sanders got off to a strong start, winning 2 out of the first 3 primaries. He won New Hampshire and Nevada, coming second in Iowa. Joe Biden was seen trailing far behind. But everything changed after Joe Biden won South Carolina. That was the turning point. Joe Biden swept the 2 Super Tuesdays, unseating Sanders in Texas and taking away the Hispanic votes. A further sweep in the southern states confirmed the African-American voter support as well to Joe Biden. Biden's sudden surge led to several within the party raising questions over Sanders' ability to expand his voter base beyond the progressives. And then came the coronavirus crisis, which all but ended Sanders' aspirations of occupying the White House. With nearly a dozen primaries suspended and Biden in the driver's seat, Sanders' campaign was all but over. And now he has drawn the curtains on what could be his last presidential campaign. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Simon Marks is now joining us live on the broadcast. Hi, Simon. Explain to us, give us a better sense of what's gone on behind the scenes for Bernie Sanders to make this decision, and your comment on the Elizabeth Warren factor.
Yeah, well, I think this decision was inevitable. It's not the decision that is surprising, it's the timing of the decision that we weren't expecting. And what's been taking place behind the scenes is relentless pressure from the Democratic Party's elites. They want to coalesce around Joe Biden, the centrist, now presumed presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. They want to free him up to become the party's national spokesman, to take on Donald Trump, particularly at this moment in American history where the country is in the midst of the coronavirus crisis. So there's been tremendous pressure behind the scenes on Bernie Sanders over the last few weeks. There were rumours that he was dropping out about 3 weeks ago. In fact, that was not the case at the time. He merely suspended his advertising spend on Facebook, but that was a very clear indication that the die was cast for the end of his campaign. I think it is interesting to note what he's doing, though. He's not removing his name from the ballot in those remaining states that are still to hold primaries and caucuses. He said in his televised address here that he wants to carry on gathering as many convention delegates as he can, because he wants to have a big voice for his ideas when Democrats all sit down, whether that's physically together later this year or in some kind of virtual convention. That will, of course, depend on the coronavirus situation at the time here. So he wants a big voice in determining the Democratic Party's manifesto and platform. As for the Elizabeth Warren issue, well, she was clearly splitting the left-wing vote with Bernie Sanders. So in that sense, Donald Trump is right. But in another sense, he's wrong, because when you looked at the number of Democrats backing centrist candidates like Joe Biden, they easily outnumbered the number of Democrat candidates backing left-wing candidates like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. So it's far from clear that Elizabeth Warren stopped Bernie Sanders from getting the Democratic Party's nomination.
Right, and you are right about the timing of that decision being a surprising factor here. Simon, the coronavirus crisis, it's safe to say, will have a huge bearing on which way the U.S. presidential election really goes. And that might be the most important factor, in fact, in the months to come.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I think it is inevitable that this November's presidential election was always going to be a referendum on President Trump's first term, but now it's more likely to be a referendum on his handling of the coronavirus crisis. And there was mixed news for President Trump in the latest opinion polls that have been published just within the last few hours. A majority of Americans say they disapprove so far of his handling of the coronavirus crisis, but there are still signs that a majority of some Americans, particularly those who did not attend college or university, continue to approve of his handling of the coronavirus crisis. Donald Trump wants to move past all of this. On Twitter, within the last few hours, he has said that once the American economy is reopened and he sees everything returning to normal, he argued on Twitter that the coronavirus pandemic must be, in his words, quickly forgotten, except by those people who have lost family members and friends to COVID-19. That's a very clear indication that he knows he has got a weakness politically, which is the history of his response initially back in January and February to coronavirus, and he wants to try and escape that politically. There is no way Joe Biden and the Democrats will easily allow him off the hook in that regard. Joe Biden, by the way, has put out a statement about Bernie Sanders' decision. He says Bernie has put his heart and soul not only into running for president, but for the causes and issues he has been dedicated to his whole life. And Joe Biden continues, while Bernie and I may not agree on many of those issues, we agree on the ultimate goal for those issues pertaining to income inequality, broadening the availability of health care for Americans, so important now during the coronavirus pandemic.
Right. We're going to leave it there for the moment. Simon Marks, thanks very much for joining us on the broadcast with those perspectives.